There we go. I realized I was like, the audio was playing. I saw me, but there was no audio. So, ooh, good thing this is the last session I'm doing. The technology is, the struggle is real. So let's dive in. So welcome to Google Workspace for Education Projects and Lesson Ideas. I'm glad I noticed that the mic was turned off before I started doing a lot of talking, because that would have been a little embarrassing. So I'm super excited for today's session, and let me know. Look at this. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, twice in one day. Thank you for coming back for my session. Stacy, good to see you. So let's get started and let's talk about some Google tools and ideas. So if this is your first time tuning in to one of my live streams, my name is Jennifer Holland. I'm an educational technology specialist in Atlanta. And that means my job is to provide technology training for teachers and help them to best integrate technology in their standards-based lessons. So I'm going to be referencing different activities that I've actually done with teachers and their students. So I'm excited about this session and sharing some ideas of ways you might want to use your Google tools. So on that note, let's get jumping in here. So goals for our time today are that we're going to explore some lesson activities, we're going to explore some project ideas, and hopefully you're going to gain ideas for lessons and projects that you can use with your students. So before we dive in, and I'm going to be talking about a bunch of different Google tools. Well, thank you so much. Glad you've watched quite a few of the videos and your first time joining me live. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here, Leanne. So I get asked a lot, you know, Jen, there's so many cool Google tools. Which do I use and when? Google Slides, Jamboard, or Drawings. When do I want to use each one? So I actually created this infographic for use cases, and it kind of highlights the different features, how you can export it, how you can use it, the collaboration features. And a lot of the things kind of overlap here in terms of what's similar, but then also things to think about. If you only want one page, you're going to go with a Google Drawing. If you want to only have 20 slides or frames, then Jamboard. If you need to have multiple pages, or you want to be able to add in video and have themes and be able to change the background, then you're looking at Google Slides. But we're going to talk about a number of different activities, and I'm going to give you use case examples for each one of those. But if you want to know a little bit more about that comparison, I did do a blog on it and created a video specifically talking about which you should use and when. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out that video. So we're going to start with ideas for Google Slides. So Google Slides is what I like to call the Swiss Army knife of Google tools. So we're going to start there, and then we'll talk about some other tools and ideas. So let's talk about how you can use Google Slides for idea number one, which is HyperDocs. And that's probably one of the most common ways. And a lot of people use Google Docs for HyperDocs, but I think it's Slides, because of the way you can format and lay out things, is a powerful use case for creating HyperDocs with Slides. So you can go in and customize the page size. You can go in and add in videos, you can add in links, and you can now have like preview options of things. And I just think it's a great way to use HyperDocs. And if you're not familiar with HyperDocs, it's the concept of taking a digital tool to create a self-packaged lesson. So in this use case, we're going through the 5E model for a lesson, and it's got the engage, it's got the explore, the explain, all of that built into the lesson with all of the resources. The advantage of creating a HyperDoc in Google Slides, you could also do this in Docs, or I've even seen it done in Drawings, is the fact that you can create that original document and then you can duplicate it and then change it. As we know, it's best to differentiate content for our learners by planning for the middle and differentiating high or low based on the needs of your learners. So that would be idea number one, is creating a HyperDoc. So I actually have some templates on my website that you can actually grab examples of a lot of these. So please feel free to grab these. This is actually modeled after the HyperDoc lesson format on HyperDoc's website, and it was just put into a Google Slides template. All right. So let me know, has anyone used Slides to create a HyperDoc lesson? The advantage of using it with Google slides is the fact that you can, if you want each student to be able to work and actually put their responses, you want them to be able to put their responses inside of the document, you can actually push it out in Google Classroom and you can assign a copy for each student. Or if you've got differentiated ones, you can actually assign them to particular students based on your learners' needs. So I love the fact that in slides you can see the version history, you can collaborate. So if they are working in small group activities, they have access to that. And you can monitor students' work, because if you assign it through Google Classroom, you can pop into their document, see who's working on it, see what's going on. And they can use the commenting feature to alert you of an issue if they need you to pop in and look at an activity. So that's idea number one. What do we think? HyperDocs using Google Slides. All right, idea number two. This one is probably one of my favorites, is using it to create comic books. So obviously they can be printed, and what's great is you can customize the page size in Google Slides, so you could actually create a slide that has 6 frames, 3 frames if you want, or each frame or each slide can equal a frame. So because you can go into the print mode and say you want to print out 6, it will actually print it out like a comic, which is really cool. What I love about Google Slides is the fact that you can create shapes, you can bring in backgrounds, you can use both PNG and JPEG images. I'm glad you like that idea. Thank you. It's good to see you, my friend. So you can add in images, and I love that I can add in my Bitmoji. So I created a comic all about like how I support teachers as an ed tech specialist. But think about the fact that the flexibility of Google Tool being free, because you can search, students can use the Explore option and search for backgrounds. So if they're talking about a particular piece of literature and they need to have the settings, so maybe they're doing a comic book about what happened in The Outsiders or Lord of the Flies or a Shakespeare play, they can use the search tool to bring in images, and then they can bring in characters, or they can create original characters from shapes to tell a story using comics, which is, I think, a great way to get students engaged in creative thinking. And also, because you can collaborate in slides super easily, it's a great way for students to work on group tasks. And so they could be responsible for different frames of the cartoon. All right, idea number 3 for slides is fill in the blank activities. I had a lot of teachers that were reaching out to me during distance learning, and they're like, I have all of these PDFs that normally I would print out and students would fill out the activities. How do I do that virtually so that without trying to reinvent the wheels? So my suggestion is that you can take any of those PDFs and you can convert them into either a JPEG or a PNG, and those can be uploaded as the background in slides. So the cool thing about that is that I can upload this image. This is an activity for Shakespeare. For those of you that have tuned in before, I'm a big Shakespeare fan because of former ELA teacher. So I can bring in this image and I can make it the background. That means students can't delete it, they can't move it, it's going to live right there. And then I added in the red boxes, which are text boxes for students to type in the vocabulary. So that's one way to make this an interactive, is that I can actually, students go in and type each word. Another option, if you're working with diverse learners, is you could actually type in the words in boxes and move them into what they call the gray space, or the extra space off of the canvas in a Google slide presentation, and they can then drag them, and now it's become both a fill in the blank / interactive activity. So slides is great for that because you can upload the background. That is one of the best features of slides, is that you can add a custom background. You cannot do that in Google Drawings. You can do it in Jamboard, and we're going to talk about that. But it just allows you to upload that image, put those red boxes. You could do the boxes in different colors. You could go ahead and do the custom fonts for the students, but then students fill in the boxes. Now, what's also kind of cool is if you are using this for a fun activity, you can also use a Chrome extension that's called Full Screen Google Slides. And if anyone tuned in earlier, I just did a live stream on, it was a Chrome extension extravaganza, and I talked about 20 different Chrome extensions, one of which is this full screen interactive Google Slides extension, which means that you have the ability to use shapes, add text, and all of that. I'll have all the tools, but it's in a present full screen mode. So definitely check that out. If you need a little bit of help and support, there is a tutorial on my channel that shows you how to create that interactive activity using Google Slides. So I walk you through the steps of what that looks like. So that is idea number 3, using Google Slides. All right, idea number 4, one of my absolute favorites, and I've had so much fun doing this project with students, and that is creating stop motion animations with Google Slides. So this is an excerpt of an example that I did for a 6th grade science lesson. They were studying renewable and non-renewable energy, and so I made an example animation to show them what they were going to do, and then the students created their own examples based on a type of energy. So all of this is created from shapes that were brought in. So I used the drawing tools in Slides. I used color shading, gradients, and all of that. So every shape, even the little car, all of that is original shapes. Now, what's cool is if you have younger learners or students that are not super creative and they need a little help, they can bring in images. And what works is you can add in the images and the elements, and you just copy each slide and add a movement, just a little bit. It might be 5 spaces to make sure it looks like it's moving fast. You do 10 spaces, and then you just duplicate all of your slides, and voila, you've got this stop motion animation. This is a fun way to get students engaged and sharing what they know after they've learned a concept. So maybe, again, like this was a science activity, but also it could be used for explaining physical changes in science. It could be used for explaining a math concept. It could be used for recreating a historical event for social studies, or an animation about how government is interconnected with the different branches of government. So many different ways you could use this. Another cool thing is that I'm using Slides to play this, because you can go in and just publish it and adjust how it works. Or you can export it using a resource called Tall Tweets, which will turn it into an animated GIF. So that now that animation is something that will auto replay, and you can add that animation back into presentations. So stop motion animation in Google Slides is so much fun. So I do have a tutorial, actually an excerpt from a lesson with those students. So if you want to see what does that look like introducing that concept to your students, you're welcome to use it to introduce the activity to your students on how to create stop motion activities with Google Slides. All right, so here's my last idea for Google Slides that I want to talk about, which is using Google Slides as a back channel in your Google Classroom. So I love Google Classroom, but it's very streamlined and it has kind of some limited functionality, but I think that it means you just got to be creative. And so how about creating a back channel for your class so you can capture, think of it like the parking lot, that old school PDs where you'd go up and put your sticky note up on the wall, but in this case you're using a Google slide deck and you have it live in your Google Classroom as a spot for students to drop those questions and comments. And so I have a template that available that has a question page and a comments page, and what you can do is you can do it by the week, you can do it by the unit, you could even do them for small group activities, but it's just a place to hold questions. The advantage of using Google Slides is the fact that you have this place that you've captured comments and questions, but you can go into the revision history if for some reason there's any shenanigans in the Google slide deck. So if someone deleted something, someone added something they shouldn't. So the ability to go into that revision history to see who's added comments and questions is great. So the back channel option I think is a great way to use Google Slides to engage your students during a lesson or a unit. So that was just 5 ideas. And I did want to point out that Google Slides works with both Nearpod and Pear Deck for interactive lessons and assessments. So if you're using either of those tools, what's great is you can create your slide deck in the slides and then bring in the functionality of Pear Deck, or you can import your slide deck into Nearpod and turn them into interactive lessons. Just a little bonus tip there. So I only shared 5 ideas, but guess what? Last year I did a 10 idea series, so I gave you 5. But if you want to get 5 more ideas, check out on the channel the 10 ideas for using Google Slides. I did a 10-part series. It was 10 tools over 10 days with 10 ideas each. So check it out. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you enjoy the sessions. Thanks so much for being here. So if you want to know some more ideas for slides, check that out. All right, now let's talk about Google Drawings. Google Drawings is probably one of my absolute favorite tools because I love graphic design, and it's a blank canvas and it allows you to do all sorts of fun stuff. So let's dive in with a couple of ideas. This is probably my absolute favorite use is creating posters, and I've done 2 really fun projects over the years with students. The first is these planet posters, and this over here is a travel poster. And both of them were 6th grade projects. The planet posters had originally been an old school art project. Students would create their original posters. They would have to draw them out and make them, cut out images, use markers, crayons, all that kind of stuff. But teachers explained to me that there was a frustration level for students that struggled with art because they were not artistic, but they had these great ideas on their mind. So I pitched the idea of using Google Slides, or Google Drawings, and that's been about, I think we've been doing it for the last 4 or 5 years. And the teachers love the idea, so my role was to come in and introduce the tool and just explain how drawings worked, give them some basic ideas of how they might create a planet poster, and then let them go. Same thing with the travel poster project, 6th grade social studies. The students had to create a poster about one of the countries they had learned about, and their requirements were that it had to have images that evoked that location. It had to have a tagline. And so that was my example for England. But these right here are the student created posters after one session, just introducing drawings. And what's great about drawings is that a lot of the same tools and functionality live in slides, but it works if you only need 1 page or 1 canvas. Now, technically you could do that in slides, but slides, you cannot just see this one large canvas to work with. You're always going to still have that one little preview bar on the side. So that's why I love using drawings. So with drawings, these posters have been amazing. Every year they get better and better and better. And during virtual learning, I even managed to do virtual classes and introduce this to students and see their amazing creations. So that would be idea 1 of a project. So it could be a propaganda poster. It could be an infographic style poster for science. So many ways for students to use it. Now you can use the search feature and bring in images into Google, so it doesn't have to be completely original. But for our requirements for these 2 projects, it had to be original. So they had to create the shapes, they had to freehand draw using the scribble tools and stuff like that, and all of the shapes were original. So that's idea number 1 for Google Drawings. If you're curious and want to know more about that project and you want to see that introduction in action, there is on my channel a creating the NASA inspired projects. I've edited down from a long 1-hour class to the gist of what you need to see. So it's a great way, if you're new to Google Drawings, it walks you through all of the tools and how you would create that planet poster. Idea number 2 is to use it to create timelines. Excuse me. What's great about drawings is the fact that the canvas can be adjusted to any size that you want it to be. So that means I can stretch it as wide as I need it to be. I can make it as tall as I want it to be. And zoom in on it. And so it's great for creating timelines. So as you can see, I have a little Genmoji timeline here as an example. So for students that are learning about historical events and social studies and they need to create a timeline, drawings is a great opportunity because you can zoom all the way in and zoom all the way out and put a lot of elements there on that 1-page canvas. So I definitely think that timelines is a great project idea or activity that you can use with your students using drawings. How about storyboards? Storyboards, I do a lot of video production, and I love that you can create a storyboard and actually use the extra space to add in elements and clip art and things like that to kind of set the stage for your story. I'm using a green bottle, and I love that it literally will show all of the colors. I find that amusing, sorry. That's the benefit of going live. You get the silly version of Jen. So I see the question about I teach pre-primary kids and would like to ask easy tool to draw and collaborate. So for pre-primary, so those are littles. So for drawing, I would say, the tricky thing is it's called Google Drawings, but you don't actually pick up a tablet and draw. There is no mobile app for drawings. It's more so using shapes and features to create elements. So for pre-primary, you got me thinking. Let me ponder that. I'm trying to think what would be a really good tool, because it would also depend on the device. Or students having access to an iPad, which is a touch device, or a touch Chromebook that allows for drawing and collaboration. One of the most basic ones that might work would be whiteboard.chat, which allows you to monitor students' work, and it does work on iPads, and because you've got littles, you can actually go in and set what tools they have access to. So you could turn it on so they only can see the drawing tools. So check out Whiteboard chat. That might be an option for you. And I do have a tutorial on the channel for whiteboard.chat if you're curious. So thanks for that question. So storyboards, great way to organize thinking and do some planning. So I have students create a storyboard before we do our filming for video projects. All right. Graphic organizers, which can be created in docs and slides, and I like using drawings because it's that one-page canvas and you can make them as small and as large as you need to. So these are a couple of examples of graphic organizers I've created. What's great is they can, in drawings, and this works for slides as well, these can be exported as PNGs or JPEGs or PDFs, so then now it becomes a file that you can bring into another tool if need be. So you could design it in drawings and then bring it into whiteboard chat. So compare, contrast different graphic organizers. It's a great way to get kids thinking. And one of the activities I've done is previously at meeting with, I worked with a 7th grade social studies class, and we were talking about, I'm trying to remember what country, it's been a minute. It was an activity where they had to compare and contrast governments. And so we had the students actually create a visual representation. So it's great for you to create graphic organizers and share them with your students. But what's more powerful is if you say, all right, represent your thinking, show me a comparison, and you could create your own, whether it's a mind map or just an original design for your graphic organizers. All right. Another reason that I love drawings is that you can use it for annotation activities. So you can bring in an image and then actually have students use the text boxes. They can use text boxes, they can use labels, they can use arrows. So all of those different elements, and they can change the colors of the lines, they can change the colors of the text and all of that. So they can label the elements of this cell. It can be collaborative, so and you can use revision history, so you can see, did both of the students or the 3 people that were supposed to work on it actually engage in it. I think it's just a really cool way to engage students. Again, it does not work on mobile devices, but you can use a tool like a Wacom tablet, which I've shared before. It's a tablet that plugs into your computer. It works on Chromebooks and MacBooks and PCs that lets you draw. So you can actually go up to the draw line and actually be able to use the tool to draw, because it's not natively going to work like you can annotate on a screen. So annotation activities is another way to engage your learners. So those were just a handful. Those were 5, but I got 5 more ideas. So if you were like, ooh, I piqued my interest, I want to know a little bit more about some ideas for using Google Drawings, please check out my 10 ideas series on Google Drawings and get 10 more ideas for Google Drawings. Let me know in the comments, are you a Google Drawings fan? How are you using Google Drawings to engage your learners? I'd love to know what your project ideas are, how you're using it with your kids. If you are brand new to Google Drawings, you've only heard of it or you've never heard of it and you want to know more about it, I did do a whole session previously on Google Drawings where I walk you through the whole process of using Google Drawings and stuff, all of the tool set and everything. Check it out if that's something you're interested in. That's on the channel. Next up, I got to talk about Jamboard. So Jamboard is probably one of my new favorite tools. It became really, really popular during the pandemic, during distance learning, because my teachers were like, I need a whiteboard. I'm used to writing on a whiteboard and I need to be able to write things down and engage students with that type of an activity. So what we did is we looked at Jamboard, and Jamboard has gotten more and more robust during this last year. And they've added so many more functionalities. So let's dive in and look at a couple of ways you might want to use Jamboard. So what's great about Jamboard is that it is only 20 frames. You can add in images, and it's very streamlined and it's easy to collaborate on it. So the max number of people you can have on a Jamboard is 50. So keep that in mind. It's not something you can have everybody jump in the Jamboard. But what's great is it's good for younger students because there is a mobile app and it's easy for students to grab images and move them around. So you can do a sorting activity. So back to that renewable, non-renewable unit I was working on with a sixth grade science class, you can do sorting activities. I brought in these images by just searching using the search feature that's available in Google in Jamboard, and brought those images in, and now you can use this as a discussion activity. Talk through whether it's whole group where you're talking through and what type of energy is this? How would we classify it? Or you could push this out as a small group activity in Google Classroom, and students would do the sorting activity themselves. So Jamboard is great for that. Now, all of the items that you're going to use for that interactive activity do need to be on the canvas. So there's no extra space. That's a limitation of Jamboard. Everything has to be on the canvas. If you want to do a sorting activity, you can also do it in slides if you need to have things off the canvas. So keep that in mind. Okay? So sorting activities is one idea for that. Another one that's kind of fun to do with virtual activities is a discussion board. So think about all those PDs or those activities you've done with your students where you ask them a question. It's like, all right, everyone whose favorite color is blue is going to go stand in that corner, and all those students that their favorite color is red are going to go over here. This is a discussion board using Jamboard, and it's virtual. So what you can do is use this Jamboard, and you can have the students either use the Post-it note option in Jamboard to drop their name and move themselves to wherever they need to go in the room, in the virtual room. Or you can also use the text option. Students can add their names, and then they can actually move it around for discussion. So it's a great way to do SEL type check-ins and discussions in a virtual space. And when you even get back face to face, you could actually have this up on the board, and students that are on their devices, if you have devices in the classroom, can still, without having to get up, we're still working on social distancing, they could move their virtual selves to their corner of the room for a discussion. So I do have that template available, and I have quite a few templates, and I want to make sure I do not forget to drop this in the chat. So I'm going to actually I've got this one right here that has a bunch of templates. So I'm going to drop this in the chat. There is links in the description of the video as well, but that one's the SOS, and I'm going to drop the templates one in here as well so that you all have access to those if you are interested. Make sure, there we go. Okay, and this one has all sorts of templates that you might find interesting. All right, drop those in there. Great. So that's our discussion one. Let's keep it moving with Jamboard. So how many of you are using Jamboard? Let me know in the comments. Have you been using Jamboard? Do you have an innovative way you're using it? Let me know in the comments. All right. Next idea is great for small group tasks because you can push this out into your Google Classroom. You can force a copy for students, or you can share one copy, and you could assign students to a particular frame. So you could say group 1 is on frame 1, group 2 is on frame 2, and so forth. And you can have them participate in a small group task virtually or face-to-face, and they are working on one space. So they can use a Post-it note activity like this is a 3 truths and a fib, or some people call it 3 truths and a lie. It's another Spotlight on Strategy from Discovery Ed. You can grab that template in the link I just shared with you and have students work in small groups. So you just create a slide or frame for each of the groups to complete their tasks, and you can just easily hop in and take a look, and you just share out the one link, and they collaborate on one or force a copy for your students. That's up to you. I was just in a PD yesterday, and it was great because I participated. There were 4 of us in our group. We were virtually participating. We had a Jamboard. We went in. We were able to discuss in our Google Meet breakout room and then complete the task in our Jamboard. So small group tasks, Jamboard is a great option. I also think it's great for SEL check-ins because you can use the Post-it note option or image options to just check in with students. So you can ask them, how are you doing? Is it a good, okay? How you feeling? Is it bad? I also love this idea of using animated GIFs. So it's like, how you feeling? So if anyone is like me and they love Schitt's Creek, I love, this is like on a scale of 1 to David, how are you feeling today? Are you super excited? Are you a little apprehensive today, or you just not feeling it. And so you can use animated GIFs. You can add in the keyword check-in, and they can add in their Post-it notes. They can add in their names. You can use emojis, and they can actually drop them where they're feeling for that day. So it's great for SEL. And there are just a few tools in Jamboard, which means that less opportunity for students to delete and mess up things. There is a revision history, so you can see if someone does delete anything. I will advise for not just Jamboard, but for any tool that any of these applications, if you create a template, always create an original one that you call original or you call template, so that if you share out something with students and they do inadvertently mess it up, you have a clean copy you can always borrow from if you need to. So there is that SEL idea. Another way to use it is a virtual parking lot. So this is a great opportunity to have students be able to just do quick responses or pose questions. And the Jamboard, because you can add in images, you can upload your own images, you can even use the camera feature in both slides, drawings, in all actually, slides, drawings, and Jamboard for students to take a picture. I participated in an activity recently where everybody took a quick selfie of how they were feeling after a PD. So just kind of a fun way. You can have them use animated GIFs or whatever, how they're feeling in a virtual parking lot. So those were just 5 ideas for using Google Jamboard. There are another 5 if you're interested to check out. If I went over all 10 ideas for all of the tools I'm talking about today, this would be the longest live stream ever. But I gave you 5 of my favorites, and there's 5 more you can check out. But let me know in the comments, was there an idea I've shared that you're like, oh, that's a great idea, or you were doing something similar? Let me know in the comments. If you're brand new to Jamboard and you did not use it this year, you did not jump on the Jamboard wagon, I do have a Getting Jamming with Jamboard PD that walks you through and gives you use cases and ideas of ways you might want to use it. So that's available, linked on my channel if you want to check that out. So the last tool I want to talk about, ways you might want to use Google Forms. So let's talk about some ideas for Google Forms. And I know the first 3 tools I talk about were creativity and collaboration tools, but I also think Google Forms is really powerful in terms of getting data and being able to engage your learners that way. So I did want to highlight a couple of ways that you might want to use Google Forms to engage your learners. As we plan for next year, one of the best ways to gather data, I used to do an old school getting to know you survey, and students would fill out the form that had 25 questions of like, what is your favorite book and your favorite color? Do you like to read at night? Or all of those questions as you're trying to get to know your students. And those were on all 100 students I had on different pieces of paper. And so I would read it. It was a great opportunity to learn about students, but it was like, if I wanted to go back and know who were all my readers, who were all of my gamers, I can use a Google form, and you can actually then filter and actually use it for pairing your students. For those students that like to work in groups, those students that prefer not to work in groups. So the Getting to Know You survey is a great opportunity. Just keep in mind a couple of tips there. If you create the survey, I would advise you create your original and then duplicate it and have a copy for each of your classes, so that you can filter your data and know that you've got your first period class and your second period class and your third period class separate. Now, if you wanted everybody's data to be in one place and you want to be able to pair and match people from all 4, 5, 6 classes you teach, just add a question on there so that you can earmark and know which class that kid is from. That's just a tip. But that would be idea number 1, using a Getting to Know You survey to learn about your students at the start of the school year. So how many of you already use a Google form for a Getting to Know You survey? Let me know in the comments. When I was in the classroom, it was old school paper. I would definitely be using Google Forms to gather that data now. All right, idea number 2, as we start the school year, is use it for some goal setting, because you can actually have the open-ended questions in Google Forms. You can have students write their goals, you can have them rank their priorities, and then what you can do is actually then reuse that form at the end of the year and do a comparison. How did they do on their goal setting? Did they achieve the goals that they set for themselves? So another cool way you can use Google Forms is for some goal setting. Pretty basic, but kind of I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, is using it for those starter and closing activities. If you're a Google Classroom user, what's great is you can go in and hit that quiz option. and you can automatically attach an assessment directly to your Google Classroom assignment for the day. And I love that you can use it at the beginning. It just be a couple of questions and it's going to gather that information. So you're going to get that pie chart data. You're going to be able to see how students are feeling, maybe at the start of a unit, assessing what they already know, not as a grade, but just kind of a pulse check with your students. It's a great way to use Google Forms. I also love the fact that Google Forms has the ability for you to import questions. So if you have a master form that has like your main form that you put all of your questions you ask for your starters and exits questions, you can then just go in and grab those questions to make your assessments and make your starter and closing Google Forms. So consider using it if you're not already doing so. Let me know in the comments. Are you using Google Forms that way? Have you already been using it for your starter and closing activities for your lessons? All right, how about for peer evaluation? Here's another use case that I wish I'd had when I was in the classroom. So as a language arts teacher, I used to use a peer editing checklist for students. So when they would, before they would do their final drafts, they would need to meet with a partner who would give them some feedback, and they would need to get some feedback to polish their work. And we used old school paper and pencil, and kids would have to fill out the check marks and give them the feedback. But how awesome would it be for you to use a form for that purpose so that you can actually share out that data and you're gathering that information in the form of a Google form. And I think that peer evaluation is a very important step in project-based learning. And so I just think it would be a great opportunity to leverage the power of Google Forms to create a peer evaluation. Let me know in the comments, do any of you all use Google Forms as a peer evaluation tool? I'd love to know. So here's where I think most people probably use Google Forms as a true assessment, but using it as a differentiated assessment is really powerful. In Google Forms, you can actually set the answer parameters to check and actually do branching. And so that's the technical way to say, if you get this question right, you're going to move on into the next section. But you get this question wrong, I'm going to move you into a different section and provide some reteaching. The other great thing is that you can build out an assessment in Google Forms and you can easily duplicate it and then modify it for your differentiated learners. So we always know that when we plan instruction or we create reassessments, we always plan there for the middle and then we differentiate high or low based on our learners' needs. So if we're doing that, we can actually go in and provide feedback based on the answer. So if the answer is correct, you can say, cool, move on, use this as an extension activity. If it was incorrect for the answer, you can actually provide reteaching right there. It could be a link to a YouTube video that you've created that reteaches that concept. It could be a link to the online activity that you all just reviewed in your textbook. It could be a link to another resource. So differentiated assessments are a great way to work with your learners. So it's not a one-size-fits-all test. You can start there, but you can differentiate based on students meeting the standards or needing some remediation. So definitely consider that. How many of you have used that branching opportunity when you answer a question that it takes you to one part of the test versus if you got it wrong, it's going to take you somewhere else? Let me know in the comments if you've used the ability in Google Forms to create a differentiated assessment. I'd love to know. I would also like to mention that Forms, because you can set up different sections and you can choose response validation, you can use Google Forms to create your own digital breakout. So it's a great opportunity to level up engagement for your students by creating this digital breakout form so that students have to complete certain tasks, and based on their responses, what they learn or their research, they plug that information into a Google form that's only going to open up to the next process or next step if they put the correct answer in. So you can do that response validation using Google Forms and use like passcodes and things like that. It's a pretty cool way to level up your activities with students. So definitely consider a digital breakout. Let me know in the comments, have any of you all used the Google Forms to create a digital breakout? So those were just 5 ideas of using Google Forms. Got another 5 if you're interested. You can check that out on the 10 Ideas series. and get another 5 ideas of ways you can use Google Forms. So I got a couple of tips, some bonus tips, but let me know in the comments, how are we feeling? Did we get an idea or two? Did it maybe remind you of something you've done before and you're like, oh, I used to do that. I should definitely try that again to see if it will level up engagement for my students. So let's talk about some tips, some things that you, some resources and some sites and some things you might want to use to level up using these tools. So one of my go-to sites for creating cool logos is cooltext.com. Years ago, that's where I created my Tech Tips 411 logo. And I use it all the time, and it's a great way for you to make logos that can be used in drawing slides and Jamboard. So there is the ability now in Jamboard to do a little bit of text formatting, but it's really cool if you want to create a logo that you want to add in your creations. And also you might want to have your students create a logo as well, because then they can add it as their virtual version of themselves for the activities that you have them participating in, like the 4 corners. Another one that I like is Text Giraffe. So Cool Text lets you go in and, so we go back here, lets you go in and pick all different versions, and then you can customize each one. Whereas Text Giraffe is you just type it in and it gives you a logo. There is no customizing it. So this is a great opportunity if you wanted to do an activity like this. There's the 4 corners, and students add their name and they can move their visual representation of themselves. That logo they've created, they can move it to whatever of the 4 corners. Now, I'm going to say one thing about Text Giraffe. I love Text Giraffe. The logos are awesome. There are a couple, depending on the age of your learners, you just need to be mindful that they look like adult beverages. So just keep that in mind. Don't just share it out with your little kids and all of a sudden all the kids are making apple juice versions of themselves. Oh, thank you for that tip right there, my friend. Good to see you, Sandra. You use flaming text because of the Croatian letters. I need to look at flaming text again. That's good to know. Something to consider that based on your language, if, you know, in English, the ones I'm picking work great, but if you're using a language that needs for different letters of different languages, thank you for that tip. I appreciate that. Let's see here. I got a question here. I see, do the students download their name and just keep it on their desktop to use over and over? Colleen, great question. So one of the things I would recommend is if you do have them making their names, they can save them to their desktop and add them to any activity, but you could also create a template that you're going to go ahead and add all of their names on it, and you can just duplicate that frame in either Jamboard or Slides where everybody's already added their name and you're just adding the background and anything else you want to it. So you can do both. Thank you for that question. That was a great question. All right. So another tip I want to mention here is that you do not need to reinvent the wheel. And one of my absolute favorite tools is Canva. And if you're interested, I did a session on Canva earlier. It's on the channel. It's called Canva Cool Creations. And I walk you through all the awesomeness that is Canva. And if you're an educator, you can actually upgrade to the educator account for free and have all of the awesome sauce. But you do not need to reinvent the wheel, because in Canva, you can actually search for presentations and download them and use them as PowerPoints and Google Slides. You can also download any of the images and use them as backgrounds in your slide presentations or your Jamboard. So you can actually search for whiteboard activities and bring them in to your Jamboard. You can search for, once you upgrade to the education version, you can search for activities, and they have worksheets for English, math, science, social studies, and other subject areas, and you can search for those, and they're all customizable, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can customize it, so you could actually take it and you could turn it into a 3-level activity. You could have the on-level activity, you could duplicate it, and you can make the changes for your emerging learners, and you could change it again for the accelerated learners. And those can be then downloaded as images and brought into Slides or Jamboard for students to complete those activities. So I just think that that's a bonus tip there. If you're not using Canva, you definitely should be. It's one of my absolute favorite things. Another great resource that has ready-made templates that you want to check out is Slides Mania. Paula has done some amazing creations. She also now has her icons, which are awesome. So you can use those to bring those icons in and customize them in your creations. But Slides Mania has a ton of digital notebook templates, game templates, any of those that you might want to use that you can modify to use with your students to level up instruction. I did drop the link already in the chat, in the comments here. This is the SOS I was talking about. I have all of these templates. The SOS is Spotlight on Strategies, which are from Discovery Education, and they're quick, easy to use strategies that you can use with digital media. And so I've got several templates I've created that you can use, and you're welcome to customize them and use them with your students. So our goal was to explore some lesson activities for Google Workspace, to explore some project ideas. Hopefully you gained some ideas for lessons and projects, and maybe you gained a couple of ideas for tools and apps that you can use to level up those activities. Again, those were our goals. I did want to give a shout out that I have some upcoming sessions, including if you're attending ISTE Live, I will be presenting at ISTE Live coming up at the end of June, a session on using Wakelet for differentiated learners. If you're interested in green screen stuff and how to level up using video in the classroom, I am presenting a session at the first annual Green Screen Summit. And so I'm going to drop the link to the chat in there that if you want to, you can register with that link and join me at that. There's going to be a ton of really cool content shared at that summit. So I'd love for you to join that if that's something that you're interested in. I will have some more PD coming soon in July when I come back as I prepare for the teachers. I had like 22 topics. The teachers picked their favorites, and I did the first 8 now, and I'm going to be doing the others when I get back in July. So if you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe so you are notified of those upcoming PDs, because I definitely want to be able to share those with you and have you tune in. Please check out resources at techtips411.com. We've got tons of stuff there that you might be interested in. And if you haven't already signed up for my Tech Tips weekly newsletter, please do that. Links in the description of the video. In addition to that, please subscribe to the channel so you are notified of any upcoming sessions. So I did want to also point out that I do have, I'm kind of excited, I've got one more Just Ask Jen. It's coming up next Wednesday. So this is it for the live stream PDs for the month, with the exception of Just Ask Jen, that it will be on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And I answer your questions live and would love for you to join me for that session. Super excited about that. So this has been a blast. I've had so much fun doing these live streams. Hopefully you have found them beneficial and enjoyed learning some ideas. I'd love to know in the comments if you found this video beneficial. Please give it a like. That does let YouTube know that I'm putting out some good stuff, and so maybe they will recommend it to other people. So that like does definitely help out. So if we're not already connected, please check out Tech Tips 411, subscribe to the channel, and tune in for future sessions. I so appreciate you tuning in. Thanks so much.